Welcome back. You're watching Open Exchange. Well, with a population of 800 million, which is expected to reach 1.2 billion in 2050, food security is still a prominent issue in Africa. And joining us for more insight on possible solutions to the problem is Chrissie Rey. She's Biotechnology and Microbiology Professor at Wits University. Thanks so much for joining us, Chrissie, this morning. Let's get straight into food security and the challenge it poses, because it's not a challenge that it puts to the table in just Africa or amongst developing nations. It's a global problem. Developed world faces the faces the issue as well. But when it comes to the African situation, just how dire a problem are we looking at?
Well, in my opinion, I think one of the problems is that Africa has a lot of arable land. A lot of land, it's very fertile, and I don't think we're using the land effectively. I think we need to increase how much we produce per hectare of land, and I think that's major. In Europe and some of the Northern European countries, land is much more limiting, but they use it very effectively in terms of how much they produce. And I think that's something that Africa needs to look at, is how to increase their productivity.
So with our context being very different, therein lying a part of the problem when it comes to the solutions we're trying to put on the table, because when it comes to developed nations, they're focusing on targeted interventions such as food aid, which can be addressed through direct food relief strategies and then food stamps, or indirectly through sustainability of food production or subsidized food production as well. Why are those solutions that cannot work here, and what kind of alternative solutions do we need to start putting on the table?
Well, there's different levels. I think, there's enough food in the world to feed everybody. So there's the question of access. And then the question of aid. I think, food security in Africa has been a problem for a long time. It's not a new problem. And I think that what we need to do is we need to make it sustainable. So we need to actually improve productivity. We need to be able to train people in order to be able to grow food. I think we need a kind of different model of how we roll out this kind of activity. So if we use South Africa as an example, the Agricultural Research Council are looking at a small-scale farming program to try and roll that out. But you have to train people to grow food. You can't just give them land, and say, well, now you need to grow food. So I think there has to be some kind of, governmental interaction where they actually roll out a program of supporting financially and technically farmers to be able to grow food. And of course, one of the things that I work in the field is, of course, biotechnology. And so these are solutions that we feel would benefit Africa and Asia more than any other continent.
How so? Because you've got a specific focus on cassava development and the growth of that to cater to the food security issue on the continent.
Well, what our feeling is that we need to take a multi-prong approach. So it's not just about growing food just for your family, feeding your family, but rather growing enough food to be able to feed your family and then being able to find markets to actually sell your food so that you can actually improve your lifestyle and create wealth. So it's not just about food security, it's about getting value from a particular crop. And cassava happens just to be one example of a crop that can offer a lot of value.
How so? Because it's a crop that we don't often talk about. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of it.
We don't often talk about cassava because it's not something, maize is our main crop in South Africa. But cassava root has a tuberous root which is very high in starch. And so it doesn't have a high amount of protein. So for example, if you're going to grow cassava as a food, you need to supplement it with proteins, or you need to actually improve the crop to actually produce a high amount of protein. And that's where biotechnology can offer one solution. The other thing is that the high starch can be used for many industrial applications. So for example, paper, it's used in making paper. Mondi and Sappi use it to make paper. It's used in the food industry, it's used in the beverage industry. There are many applications, and of course the other buzzword, of course, is biofuels, to use the high starch as a fermentable biomass to make biofuels. So it's a very diverse crop. The starch that comes from the roots is not only just for food, but also for industrial application. So if you can come up with a more integrated model for a particular crop, it adds value to that crop, and therefore it can be used to grow what we call the bioeconomy.
Is this being noticed as much as it should be by government specifically? Because you highlighted earlier that initiatives and endeavors like this specifically need government support to take off successfully.
Well, yes, they have. It's taken a long time, but finally I do have the government's attention on cassava, and I have a lot of support from the Technical Innovation Agency, which of course is part of government, and the Department of Science and Technology do realize this. But it's difficult to take a crop that is not well known, and then you have to look at what the competing markets are. But I have some people from South Africa that are very interested in this, Tonga Tulip, for example, a national starch, and I'm working with a lot of people from industry and government and academia to try and put together some kind of model for growing cassava in South Africa. So yeah, we are working on this actually.
Well, certainly very interesting and something that we'll be keeping an eye on. Chrissie Rey is Biotechnology and Microbiology Professor at Wits University.